The other addition, Kamari Brooks, North Oconee High School, outside linebacker, 6'4", 220 pounds. And you could make the case to me that this was the most important addition for Georgia at any position in the 2026 recruiting class. I will hear out the case for several others. I'm willing to do that. Jared Curtis definitely has a case. Jay Lamar, honestly, in many respects, has a case. Some of the potential defensive line ads or offensive line ads that may or may not have happened yet, they could have a case. But the reason why I bring up Kamari Brooks, Georgia only planned from the outset to take one outside linebacker. That plan could always change. You never know what's going to happen with numbers or how guys are going to perform this fall. It might change NFL draft decisions, and Georgia has to go find a guy late. I'm not ruling that out. But during this, the meat of the recruiting cycle, Georgia was only going to take one outside linebacker. And they identified Kamari Brooks right in their backyard as the guy that they wanted or needed to have at that spot. And more than any other position, I think that Georgia took a little bit of a risk in how they recruited other outside linebackers. I mean, you just look, they brought Dre Quinn, who committed to Clemson. They brought him in on an official visit. But they had official visits scheduled for guys like Xavier Griffin-Haynes, who I think would have loved to have committed to Georgia at one point in time. There were guys like Keldrick Golston, who has family ties to Georgia. Landon Barnes from Texas. You know that Georgia's trying to establish even more of a footprint in Texas, as they're trying to prove later this week as well. And those were guys that wanted to come on official visits to Georgia, and Georgia basically encouraged them to use their weekends in a different way. And that could have been risky. Kamari Brooks easily could have committed to Alabama. Former Georgia linebacker Christian Robinson did an outstanding job in that recruitment to keep Alabama involved. But Georgia just didn't feel like that was a recruitment that it could afford to lose. And I think that you have to tip your cap to Chidera Uzo-Diribe, because it takes a bold recruiting method to look at other outside linebackers and say, hey, don't even come on your official visit. Like, we're only able to take one, and we think we know which one we're going to be going with. If you miss out on that, if he chooses Alabama on Monday, which obviously leading up to Monday, I think that Georgia's coaching staff felt pretty confident about where they stood in the Kamari Brooks recruitment. But if he chooses Alabama on Monday, after the only other outside linebacker that's officially visited Georgia has already committed to Clemson, I don't really know what direction you turn to, and you're probably having to wind up going way, way down your recruiting board. I think that Kamari Brooks really felt that prioritization from Georgia. I even saw some of his family members on social media put out some cool hype videos where they actually had a behind-the-scenes look where they're in the office in March with Chidera Uzo-Diribe, and Chidera Uzo-Diribe is basically saying, we're taking one, and we want it to be you. And that's, early stages of the spring practice window, and they reiterated that time and time and time again. And where Alabama was recruiting a couple of other guys to their Wolf position, Georgia really only had one jack that it wanted in the 2026 recruiting cycle, and it got it in Kamari Brooks. I was talking to someone completely unrelated to the outside linebacker room, actually completely unrelated to the defense, I should say. I was like, who are the guys that I'm not – it was inspired by our Junkyard Roundtable, where who's the most untalked about guy on the football roster. I was like, who's the most untalked about guy in this 26 class? Kamari Brooks' name came up as someone where we have him ranked as the number 19 edge in the 24/7 sports recruiting rankings. I think that he will see that rise. I think that Georgia views him in a much greater light than that. That's why they prioritized him the way that they did at that spot. But just a name to tuck away as someone that I will call my shot. He will be a team leader for Georgia in the future. He's wired that way. And I think skill set wise, you really can't ask for more from a guy that can set the edge in the run game. And also, I think has a ton of room for growth to develop his skill set and packages as a pass rusher. I think he's going to be great at it in the future. And I don't think he's even scratched the surface yet of how dynamic he's going to be able to be on that front.
I mean, to the point you were just making, Ben, of the four guys Georgia just added, I really like all four of them. I mean, I think Kamari Brooks is the guy who impresses me the most. And I wanted to emphasize what you were just saying. Georgia kind of put all of its eggs in the Kamari Brooks basket. And it was pretty similar with Jay Lamar, although we know they're recruiting other running backs. Whereas the situation, if they don't get either of those guys, you're kind of going, okay, what's the backup plan? Because you put a lot of stock in getting this guy. Kamari Brooks, I was really impressed. If you're listening to this, go watch his highlights, and he's going to play on defense. But I was really impressed with him catching the ball. His balance is fantastic, which I know will translate to playing on defense too. Really liked his highlights, and I'm always going to be a sucker for the hometown kid, getting a guy from North Oconee. Now, you don't prioritize him because he's local, but I think when you get those local recruiting wins, they're always really special. I think Kamari Brooks was a guy that Georgia honed in on very early in this cycle, and it winds up paying off. And I really like his upside and what he can bring to Georgia once he gets here, either later in the year or in the spring.
Great championship caliber program over there at North Oconee as well. 2 cycles in a row, Georgia's taken someone from North Oconee. I would say Landon Roldan showed up after the commitment ceremony, but he was there to celebrate with his close friend Kamari Brooks on Monday afternoon as well. Those two are very close friends. I thought that I think it was closer than I probably gave it credit at times. Like, I think Christian Robinson did a spectacular job there. This one was going to be, for so many reasons, it was going to be so impossible for anybody else to get him away from Georgia. And credit to Chidera Uzodiribe, who, it's 2 cycles in a row. I feel like he's done as good of a job as you could have asked for him to do. I mean, he lands Isaiah Gibson in a difficult recruitment last cycle. He goes and gets Darren Akinnigbon early in the cycle as an evaluation that Georgia loved and wanted to pursue immediately, and then finds a late eval and someone that I think that they're really excited about in Chase Linton. And then you turn it around and go and get your number 1 target at outside linebacker. The 2027 class has 3 of the best players in the country at outside linebacker in the state of Georgia. I don't know if Chidera Uzodiribe will be around for that or not, but if they are, I think that it's safe to say Georgia's in good hands when it comes to recruiting that position right now.